Much, Susanna, and hello, everybody. Yeah, I'm James Turner from the Sutton Trust. Really delighted to be partnering with TASO on this event this morning. I've been listening with interest right from the start, and a big thanks from me to everybody who's contributed to this morning's session as well. I've got the tricky task of wrapping up. What I'm not going to try to do is summarize the last 3 hours in just a few minutes. I don't think I'll be able to do justice to the quality of all the presentations we've heard, all the questions that have been posed and the answers we've been given by the panelists. But for me, the conversation has absolutely emphasized to me that this is the right time, and actually a really important time, to be talking about this issue of fair access once again. So absolutely, reminding people of its importance in driving social mobility. And there's a lot of good evidence out there on that now, I think. But also, as we heard, particularly from the first panel, reinforcing the arguments behind some of the existing things that are already being done in our system to promote fair access. And then, of course, as the last panel explored, exploring new ideas to make admissions fairer, because I think it's clear from the data, and Eunice mentioned this right at the start, that although progress has been made, there's still a long way to go. I would say from the sort of Sutton Trust point of view, and this I think was reflected in some of the comments that the first panelists made, that it does feel like quite a perilous time for fair access. In that we know there's some changes afoot, some changes going to happen, but we don't quite know what form it's going to take or how radical its consequences are going to be. So as we discussed at that very macro level, as well as the impact of COVID that Mary mentioned, that's going to wash through the system for a number of years to come still. Over the next 10 years, we do have this demographic bulge in young people aged 18, and therefore potentially more demand for university places. Now, all our experience at the Trust suggests that increased competition tends to be bad for social mobility, especially when the other alternatives, the other high quality alternatives like apprenticeships, for example, are still few and far between. There are still, the number of high quality degree level apprenticeships are in the low thousands for young people, whereas we have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of undergraduate places. So if we're not going to be offering these young people traditional undergraduate places, what are we going to offer them, I think is a big question. And then I think on a more granular level, we also, as already been discussed, we have this new regulatory regime. We have John Blake's appointment as Director of Access at the OFS. It's still very early days, of course, on that, but I think a direction of travel is absolutely starting to emerge, and it's a direction of travel that might be challenging for universities, as well as potentially having some opportunity as well. And as part of all of that, it certainly strikes us that some of the consensus that's been growing around fair access is being challenged now. And this is something that Vicky mentioned, and I'm thinking, particularly here actually of contextual admissions, which has long been something that we at the Trust have advocated, and we think is absolutely central to progress in fair access. So that idea that universities should take into account potential as well as grades in admissions decisions has really moved into the mainstream over the last decade or more. But I don't think, as we've heard today, there is any guarantee it's going to stay there. And of course, we also have this backdrop of PQA and PQO, as Quintin discussed right at the beginning, as well as reforms to university finance and potentially the introduction of minimum entry requirements in the not too distant future. So it's a very busy landscape. And in the 25 years the Trust has been around, it's our birthday in 2022, it feels like a very important inflection point. A moment to reassess, a moment of some opportunity, as I said, but also I think some risks as well. Now, I would say absolutely some change and challenge could be healthy. It'd be wrong to suggest that everything in the higher education garden is rosy and that every student is well served by the status quo. So we know, as Mary and Omar have alluded to, that the biggest driver of access gaps is certainly unequal attainment at schools, particularly that GCSE Key Stage 4 moment that Mary talked about. That is clearly not something the HE sector can dismiss or can wash its hands of. I think the question really, which I think is a big one, a really thorny one, is how best universities can realistically engage and tackle that issue. So if it's not contextual admissions, what exactly is it? And on labour market outcomes, where students go after graduation, which is, again, increasingly the focus of a lot of recent debates, and it's come up this morning, those labour market outcomes do matter. At the Trust, since we were set up in '97, we've supported over 50,000 young people from low-income homes into university. And they generally do want to know where their degree is realistically going to take them. And actually, particularly those from debt-averse and poor homes often want to know, what the career rewards will be, what their salary will be. It's not the only thing they are interested in, but it is a big factor in their thinking. So I think the question is how to measure and convey that in an intelligent and proportionate way, which is not straightforward. But as well as looking at all of those things, we also absolutely need to keep banging the drum for fair admissions. It's not a poor relation to other parts of the government's levelling up agenda. It could absolutely be, at its heart, absolutely be an ally to that agenda, because we have made progress. There are more low-income young people at university than ever before, which is great. But where you study and what level you study at is still hugely dependent on socioeconomic background. So that clearly isn't a meritocracy. It still represents a huge waste of the talent that's out there. So as well as defending those established positions that are worth defending, it's also right that we have, as we have today, look at more radical solutions, the sorts of things our panelists have talked about, to make sure we have that truly equitable system that we all want. But my final message and my big hope, I guess, is that we shouldn't make any change unless it is evidence-based, or where the evidence is not there, that in the pursuit of trying new things, we build the evidence rather than just flip-flop between new fads and new ideas. And I can promise Omar has not paid me to say this. I think the role of TASO is so important, perhaps now more so than ever, because that evidence-based approach isn't just policy rhetoric. It's actually about learning from what has worked elsewhere, so it has maximum chance of success in the future. And it's about making sure an intervention gets the outcomes that were intended. So the alternative is a waste of time, energy, and money. And most importantly, a failed initiative, a failed policy lets down the very young people all of us on this call in this conference want to help. But my final word is just on behalf of TASO and the Sutton Trust to say a massive thanks to all our panelists, to Eunice, to Minto, Mary, Vicky, Quinton, and of course to Susanna, Karen, Harry, and Omar, whose idea this conference was in the first place. A big thank you also to all of us, to the team who put in lots of hard work to put this morning together, so to Chloe and Adam at TASO, but also Erica, Hilary, and Ruby at the Sutton Trust. And most of all, thank you to all of you for participating so fully in this morning's agenda. There will, as I think has been mentioned in the chat, be a recording of this event for you to play back or to share with colleagues. And we'll also be sending out a feedback form tomorrow. So do watch out for that in your inboxes. But thank you again and have a great afternoon.